There are 10 shortages happening right now that affect your ability to be better prepared. So in this video, we're going to talk about what those shortages are and how they affect your preps. Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and today we're talking about how there's 10 shortages going on around the world right now that make it harder for us to be better prepared. These things can affect us from not being able to acquire what we need to affecting the preps we already have. So we need to discuss what's going on out there, and we know the supply chain has broken down quite a bit due to the effects of last year. So if you're trying to stay ahead of the game and you want to be better prepared, hit the subscribe button below because these things are happening right now and we need to be able to talk about it, okay? So the number one shortage that's going on right now around the world is a water shortage. This is huge. In your preps, you have to make sure that you have ways to either store water, treat water, and access water during any kind of an emergency. And right now you can see around the world, from the west coast of the United States all the way to the Middle East, many different states and countries are dealing with the side effects of a water shortage. They're not sure how they're going to have enough water to sustain their population through the drier months of the year. And that's going to affect all of us at some point in time. So make sure you look at the shortage. That's very important because water, you can't last without it for more than 3 days. If you don't have a way to treat water, if you do have access to water, if you don't have a way to access water, then you need to have water stored. And if you don't have water stored, then I'm not sure how you're going to survive an SHTF scenario. So make sure you're looking at this water shortage as being highly important. You need to prioritize your ability to stay hydrated, okay? So moving on from there, which is related to water, another shortage, so the number 2 one on this list is going to be chlorine. There's a chlorine shortage right now due to a plant that was basically destroyed during a hurricane last year down in Louisiana that produced a lot of the chemicals, including chlorine, that's used to treat things like swimming pools around the country. And now chlorine has gone up almost double in price since that occurrence. Keep in mind that a lot of us in the prepping community rely on things like pool shock to treat water in an emergency situation. So if you don't have your chlorine, your bleach, your pool shock, or anything else related to chlorine stashed away, you might see those prices rising and you might even find it harder to acquire at this point in time. So the chlorine shortage is definitely something else you need to take a look at, which can affect your ability to be better prepared because you might not be able to treat as much water without it, okay? Another shortage that's happening right now, or number 3 on this list, is going to be the microchip shortage. We've talked about it a lot on this channel, but it is still an issue and it's something you need to keep an eye on. If you want to move forward in the sense of technology, you're going to pay more and more for it right now. And the microchips affect everything on the planet related to technology. So anything that's electric that utilizes some form of processing is going to be more expensive and harder to acquire. And especially when you're talking about things that help generate more of an ability for you to either defend yourself or defend your property. Let's talk about something as simplistic as a surveillance system. Well, that is going to be harder and harder to get. And why I'm making this video is to remind everybody here that if you can get the preps that you need and you have the budget in order to do so, you might want to act on it quickly because things are starting to fall off very fast and becoming either very expensive or hard to obtain. And I wanted to remind you on this, especially with the microchips, because even just running things like a YouTube channel requires a computer, and without that, you don't have that. So there's those things that you have to consider, okay? So moving on from there, gas. Number 4 on the list, gas is going to be more expensive and harder to come by this summer. It's been telegraphed and they're talking about it, but a big part of this shortage has nothing to do with the Colonial Pipeline. It has everything to do with the trucker shortage. There's not enough people to deliver the gas to where it needs to go. So if we don't have the logistics in place, aka the supply chain, then the gas doesn't make it to where it needs to be. And so shortages then arrive. So make sure you have ways to store gasoline. Make sure you have the fuel you need to be able to consume during an emergency. Make sure you have enough gasoline to get your bug out vehicle from point A to point B without worrying about refueling midway, or else you might not even be able to. So keep those things in mind because this gas shortage is another thing we need to keep an eye on. It also prevents us from being able to use power tools in the sense of heavy outdoor equipment that many preppers and homesteaders rely on in order to cultivate their land, produce their own food, which then makes makes things a lot harder in the sense of being able to eat. So you can see how these different shortages can affect all of our preps in one way or another, okay? Moving on from there. Lumber, okay? Lumber is extremely expensive. There's a shortage of it due to many different things, but mostly in the mills. It sounds to me, from what I can understand, that people are still selling off trees and still selling off their lumber and still selling the lumber rights on their land to these companies, and they're not making any extra money from it. But somehow down the line, once you get through the mill, the lumber skyrockets in price. In some cases, up to 7 times as more expensive as it used to be just less than 6 months ago. So in that situation, keep in mind that if you're trying to build outbuildings, if you want to build something that's more fortified to make sure your home is better secured during an emergency, that lumber is going to be harder and harder to acquire, and it's getting more and more expensive. And these are things that may eventually fix themselves, but in the sense of prepping, in the prepping for an SHTF scenario, we never know when that emergency event's going to occur. So we could wait the next couple years or so to hopefully see lumber prices level back out, but could something happen within those 2 years? Of course it could. So these are things we need to consider and keep in mind. And don't forget that pallets can sometimes be your best friend when it comes to acquiring cheap wood. So, moving on from there. Metals, okay? So I guess let's see, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is going to be metals. And metals, when I say that, is related to a lot of different things, including copper, nickel, lithium, cobalt, rare earth metals, aluminum. We can see a lot of different industries being affected by this right now. And it's all based on logistics, it's based on regulations for the mining industry, and it's based on the fact that there's only such a supply of a lot of these materials, and the mining regulations is limiting their ability to produce. And when it comes to things like green energy, which we all know is very popular nowadays, well, even in the prepping community, we enjoy our green energy, only in the sense of, say, solar power, okay? So when it comes to that, think about this. Anytime you're looking at lithium batteries, especially in the sense of a solar unit, in the sense of anything rechargeable like your flashlights or maybe your radio communications or whatever else you have that requires a charge in order to operate, often they are powered by things like lithium-ion batteries. And that material is becoming harder and harder to get because the demand is going up and up and up. So in that sense, make sure you're getting the generator units and the batteries you need before they get too hard to acquire or are priced out of your price range. And keep in mind that even things like aluminum are extremely difficult to get right now. Breweries around the country can't even get enough cans to put their beer in. That's a huge problem that's happening logistically to places like breweries that doesn't even affect our ability to prepare yet, but it might affect our ability to acquire things that are like canned goods down the road, which are a staple of most prepper pantries. So another thing to pay attention to, understand that those rare earth metals and things like copper that are in everything electronic and things like, lithium that help maintain our rechargeable components, those are necessary items for us to maintain some kind of quality of life in the sense of electricity, and it might not be available if that shortage continues down the road. So, moving on from there, number 7, steel. So we're talked about metals, but let's talk about steel now as well. Steel is having the same issue as most of those metals, but not because of things like mining, but because of production. Production was halted in many ways. Steel plants around the country were shut down due to the effects of last year, and now it's making things like automobiles more and more difficult to acquire. And I don't know why I keep saying automobiles, because I guess I'm from a 1911 cartoon of some kind. But anyway, keep in mind that that steel is going to move down the line. So that steel is going to make things that we enjoy in the prepper community more expensive down the road. That steel production could even affect things like your survival knife, which is something that we already know for a good one can be a decent amount of money. That might go up as well. So keep in mind that a lot of this stuff is going to have snowball effects and could eventually affect each other. AKA the microchips are making it harder to make vehicles, while the steel is also making it harder to make vehicles, and suddenly vehicles become very difficult to acquire. So, that being said, the number 8 item on this list is going to be vehicles. Vehicles, especially brand new ones, are in a huge shortage. And for preppers and for people who are worried about being able to be mobile post SHTF emergency, you have to remember that a good quality vehicle can be very important. It can be the difference of life or death, especially in the sense of getting to a bug out location. Well, new vehicles hard to get. If you want to get the exact model and the exact color and the exact all that stuff that everybody likes to get when they get a brand new car, good luck, because right now it's very difficult. And the used car market has exploded. Your used vehicle you have right now is probably worth more right now than it was when you might have even bought it. So keep in mind that that equity could be there. Maybe it's a good time to refinance. Maybe it's a good time to trade in and get as much value as you can out of that vehicle. Maybe you should just sell it on the private market where we all know you get the best deal for your dollar. But keep in mind that right now, vehicles are scarce. And if there's a vehicle that you're wanting to get because you feel like it might make you more prepared. Maybe you want a Jeep Wrangler of some kind. Maybe you want to get an electric Ford Lightning. Whatever it might be, it's going to be harder and harder to get, at least in the short term. So understand that book values of used vehicles are supposedly going up come June, and that's going to just make your used car even worth more than it probably ever has been before. And that is something that you should consider in the sense of maybe consolidating finances, maybe trying to earn some extra cash to put into more preps in the sense of maybe food or something like that. These are things you should look at right now, because if you weren't aware, that car of yours is worth quite a bit of money. Okay, so number 9 on the list is going to move into food. So specifically, let's talk about something like chicken wings. Chicken wings are gone. There's a huge chicken wing shortage. You can ask any restaurant out there in the country that sells chicken wings. They're hard to get, and when you do, they're really expensive, and it's because of everything related to last year. When the supply chain broke down, places closed down, especially restaurants, which made the demand for things like chicken wings fall through, which then turned into the manufacturers and the producer of said chicken wings into not producing as much product because there wasn't any more demand. The whole thing snowballed down, and you can apply this to almost every meat product out there. It's getting really expensive to get meat of any kind, and it's getting really hard to keep up with demand, and we're seeing these shortages affect businesses as well as households around the country. So keep in mind, if you're storing up things like meat, and I do like my canned chicken as part of my prepper pantry, that canned chicken might be more and more expensive and harder to get very soon here. So do what you can, prep now, especially when it comes to food, because these shortages are not limited to chicken wings. They're all over the board when it comes to food, especially protein. And moving on from there, number 10. This is a big shortage, and it's not the kind of shortage that we usually talk about in the sense of things we can acquire and hold in our hands. It's nothing tangible. It's a labor shortage. This labor shortage is really bad. It's incredibly difficult to get people to come back to work right now. People are just staying home. They're also figuring out other ways to just work from home and do the same job they did before without going to a place of business, which is totally fine. The only issue is that the labor force has changed because of what they were forced to deal with during the last year. And of course, there's also the incentives for not working, such as unemployment insurance, such as the stimulus money. So there's a lot of reasons why this labor shortage is occurring. But this labor shortage could be very bad for both you and I in acquiring the prepping gear that we need in order to maintain our ability to survive. So keep in mind that every single person that doesn't come back to work is one more person not on that assembly line putting together that next piece of equipment that you're looking to purchase. That one more person is one less person in the meat packing plant trying to help keep the cost of meat down in order for us to be able to acquire it for our homes. That one less person is one less skilled laborer building houses with lumber that they can't even access right now because they can't even afford it. So there's a lot of things that labor can affect. In fact, it affects the entire board when it comes to production. And that is a huge issue, and it goes right back to the gas shortage as not having enough truckers to deliver the gas that they have. It's not about the supply of gas, it's about getting it to where it needs to go. And the less laborers that return to the workforce, the less people there are to get those supply chains back up and running. So as you can see, huge snowball effect. And this is something that you need to pay attention to, because if you're prepping and you're worried about being as prepared as you can for any kind of an emergency situation, all of these shortages we just talked about are going to cause problems. So if there's other shortages that I didn't mention here, because there are some, there's definitely more, leave them in the comments below so we can discuss those as well and let everybody know how those shortages might affect them too. And if you have anything else to add about the shortages I discussed here, I'd also like to hear your comments. Some of the best information that I've gotten from any other source that I use is down in the comments section, because people like to give us their 2 cents, and sometimes other opinions help open our minds to better ideas on what we have for ourselves. So, without anything else to say about the 10 shortages that are happening right now. That's going to be it for Magic Prep.